MP Westcott. I now give the floor to MP Maarten. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason this motion will get my support, it clearly states that a decision was taken by the Prime Minister of this country. If one cannot believe the words coming from the Prime Minister, who then should we believe? If a Prime Minister goes on a public statement and say, all political rallies, all political gathering, and election day gathering will be cancelled, will be prohibited, and like we like to use in here, halt. So based on that decision, so are we now as members of parliament, when we hear things coming from the Council of Ministers, don't believe them no more. Because when they say something, a week later, not even a week later, a day later, the relevant minister can come in here and say, don't bother with he. I the boss, and I say, nothing goes so. So let me unconfuse the population of St. Maarten now, based on what the minister say, and based on what we understand in here, is that there is nothing published as yet. We're waiting on advice. So go ahead, behave, act normal, no fear-mongering, have public meetings with a little precaution, but go ahead, because it's obviously clear that the statements coming from the Prime Minister is totally false. So right here, I just get the notification from my colleagues, and I would like to say, all public meetings cancelled, no polling station gathering allowed by Prime Minister Dr. Luc Mercelina. Again, if the highest body in this country make these kind of statements and they are false, who are we to believe in this country? If we can't believe he, who we must believe? I thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Maarten. I now give the floor to Member of Parliament Gums.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I won't be supporting this motion, but I can understand both sides of the argument regarding public rallies and the like. People have paid bills, they have made arrangements with caterers, etc. So I can understand that. But I also understand election day, which is something that I myself have publicly said. I don't believe that there should be persons around polling stations for many reasons. As I said in a previous version of this meeting, this started for me January when we had that fight outside Belvedere. And while that may not have been politically motivated or whatever, it happened on a day when persons are expected to go and cast their vote in peace. I also made those objections known to the voting bureau after that election. So I won't be supporting the motion, but I just wanted to state that election culture is something that shifts. To the north of us, you're not allowed outside a polling station. There's no such thing as big rallies. So these things shift and they change, like all culture shifts and change. And we have to keep that in mind for future elections as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you very much, Honourable Member Melissa Gums. I see also MP Duran would like to have the floor. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister, for the clarifications based on the interruptions and also the other clarifications, although it's still not clear. One thing I would like to say, it doesn't make sense to go back and forth. It's clear to me what is taking place. You are on a different frequency than your colleague, and I think the general population has noticed that by now. However, I would like to say the idea and the impression, let's just say if I was locked up in a room just listening to the government, I would believe that there's civil war taking place in St. Maarten, and when you come outside, you have to run, duck, and hide, as is the case in certain African countries, and even right now in our brothers and sisters in Haiti, with all the different civil war that is taking place there. That is not the case in St. Maarten. However, we do have a serious crime issue, and we do need to look at it and take it serious. As I mentioned before in the same meeting, safety first and foremost, by all means. And I respect that because I sat in that same chair, so I know that the main safety of the general population is first and foremost. However, I do not believe in fooling the people, misguiding the people, misinforming the people in order to sell a certain narrative. That is my concern. That has always been my concern. When I was Minister of Justice, through you, Mr. Chairman, I got a lot of heavy criticism because I chose to take the whole route of these same guidelines, a different approach, whereas people were allowed by the polling stations, you didn't have to take on the signs, because that's Maarten culture. At the end of the day, it's still part of our culture. Has things changed in the meantime? Of course. Do we have to adjust to the times? I agree. But do it in a responsible manner. Don't try to mislead the people in going a certain direction, because you can. And when I say you, I refer to the statements of the Prime Minister, which clearly doesn't have the authority to make these decisions. With that being said, I have to support this motion. I heard one of my colleagues mention that they can't support the motion because the guidelines haven't been published yet. But as my other colleague, Maarten, mentioned, if we have to not take the words of the Prime Minister seriously and do as if these words were not communicated to the public, then I think we have a serious, serious problem in this country, bigger than the violence issue that we have in this country. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you very much, Member of Parliament Duran. I now give the floor to Member of Parliament Atwell Arian. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I look at the considerations of the motion, it mainly states about political. So I heard another MP mention about public and so forth. No, our considerations are referring to political. But in addition to that, if you have been paying attention to this meeting, we would never get an answer. It doesn't take that long to get an MR done. And if we continue, right now we are doing the minister a favor. We are setting the guidelines for him. We are doing him a favor. Since the Council of Ministers cannot decide on the guidelines going forward, and we do not want to continue to be politically basically guided into in a position where we would not get an advantage, because again, the Prime Minister came out in the press briefing and said, no public meetings, they'll all be cancelled. And on top of that, he doubled down on what he said in his radio interview a couple of days later. He didn't say, hey, you know what? I was too eager in my discussions in press briefing. I did not finalize the guidelines. Yes, we are working in the safety of the country, but we are going to get the final guidelines from the minister. No, he doubled down and said all public meetings will be cancelled, which is in total contradiction to what, to you, Mr. Chairman, the Minister of Justice is saying. He is clearly stating there will be guidelines, and he cannot even give a timeline to when these guidelines will be given. Council Ministers is next week Tuesday. By that time, we have a week left before elections. So what will be the purpose or intentions of setting a guideline 2 days before elections? Are we going to play a game now of testing safety in the meantime or not? Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned before, we are doing the Minister of Justice a favor and setting the guidelines for him and taking off the pressure from the Council of Ministers off of your back. And I will support this motion.
I thank you very much, Honourable Member Arian. I now give the floor to Member of Parliament Rosberg. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I will not be supporting this motion, as I'm of the opinion that this motion is too premature, seeing that, based on what the Minister said through you, Mr. Chair, the guidelines are not in place as yet. They are currently being finalized. And the Minister also mentioned through you, Mr. Chair, that hopefully today he will get the answer and then it can be finalized. So therefore, what's currently on paper of the draft motion is not clear based on what it was, to what conclusion they came based on what paperwork. So therefore, I cannot support the motion because it's very detailed. And it seems that the ones that drafted the motion have more information than the current minister herself. So I'm waiting on the guidelines, and therefore it's too premature, and I will not be supporting it.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member of Parliament Roseberg. I now give the floor to the Honourable Member